Okay. Well, we do have quite a busy, full session to share with everybody this morning. So I'm going to get us started off with now. So thank you very much for joining us today, folks, and participating in our webinar that's called Creating Attainable Housing Through Innovative Land Use Planning. We're really excited to have a couple of guest speakers here today to talk about their work and some of the experiences that they've had with the PlanH project here at BC Healthy Communities. So once again, this is our Healthy Public Policy webinar series. Thank you for joining us here on the first day of October. And we'll just go to the next slide, please, Pat. There we go. Perfect. Great. And once again, so hello, folks. My name is Vanessa Manuel. We will have, I'll introduce myself a little bit more thoroughly here in a moment, but thank you for joining us today. Today, I'm joining you from the traditional territories of the Lekwungen-speaking people of the Songhees and Esquimalt nations, and the Wasanic peoples represented today by the Sartlip, Pakachin, Sayut, Sekam, and Malahat nations. Recognizing that we are here just outside of Greater Victoria today, and we're very happy to welcome folks to join us. And we take a moment as well, too, if in the chat you would like to recognize the territories in which you're joining us from today. We've got quite a number of folks from across the province, as well as some of the other provinces across Canada. So I would like to recognize, too, that the First Peoples have been here since time immemorial, and their history in this area is long and rich. So next slide, please, Pat. Thank you. Perfect. And we'll just skip right over here. So hi, folks. So again, my name is Vanessa Manuel, and I am the Executive Director here for BC Healthy Communities, and I am pleased to be moderating this webinar for folks today and to be introducing our speakers and having participating in their great presentations, and I'll also help to facilitate our question and answer section as well. So today we have two wonderful speakers joining us, Steven Collyer as well as Erika Sagert. Steven is the Housing and Policy Initiatives Manager for the City of Penticton. His role involves leading local housing-related and other policy initiatives, monitoring progress, and planning ahead for their community's future. Steven holds a master's in public administration from the University of Victoria and a bachelor of community design from Dalhousie, and he brings together strategic urban planning with social development and data-driven solutions. Steven integrates community feedback with municipal land use planning to help bolster policies that will facilitate development of affordable housing within his community. Also joining Steven is Erika Sagert, and Erika is going to lead off our webinar today, and she is the Director of Sector Capacity Services at BC Nonprofit Housing Association, where she leads programs that strengthen the capacity of nonprofit housing providers across British Columbia. Erika has a background in planning, public policy, research, community engagement, and she's committed to advancing housing equity through sector collaboration, education, and leadership development. She works closely with sector leaders, partners, government to address complex housing challenges and support innovative, community-driven solutions. Erika is passionate about building strong, sustainable, nonprofit housing sector and creating opportunities for shared learning and impact across the province. She holds a Master's of Arts in Planning from the University of British Columbia. And we're very happy to have this collaborative presentation with both Erika and Steven today. So just next slide, please, Pat. Just a couple of housekeeping slides before I hand it over to Erika and Steven here, but we're asking for folks within our Teams webinar platform here. There's a couple of ways that you can communicate with us. It would be great if folks could post any questions and answers or any questions, I should say, that they might have throughout the webinar in the Q&A section. We will be keeping an eye on this. And then as course, many of you are seeing here, we do have the chat feature also enabled here. So you're welcome to post any other comments in the chat as well too. We have the whole BC Healthy Communities team here joining us today, and we'll help to monitor and facilitate these. They will be holding questions until the end of the webinars. So we will be keeping track, but just coming to that towards the end. We are also recording this session today, so this will be available on the BC Healthy Communities website following the presentation today. And then we will also be sending a follow-up email in the next day or two with the link to that recording, as well as an info sheet. And then at the end of the webinar too, we will also be providing a link to a survey that we would really appreciate it if folks would complete the survey. It helps us here at BC Healthy Communities understand the impact of the webinars, what's useful, what we could improve, and what went well. So if you wouldn't mind taking a few minutes following the webinar today or tomorrow to complete the survey, we would really appreciate that. One other quick piece with the housekeeping is, like I said, we are recording this session, and as such, we do kindly request that anybody that has their own AI recording devices not join the meeting. We do, we know that some of them kind of join automatically, and we will be just denying those admissions into the webinar today because we are recording it and monitoring it ourselves. So please just turn off any AI recordings that you may have requested to join the meeting. And then next slide, please. I'm going to go through these next slides pretty quickly here, just because we've got some full presentations. It hasn't advanced yet. There we go. Perfect. Thanks, Pat. So just again, a bit about us here at BC Healthy Communities, that we're really a team of planners, public health specialists, and community engagement practitioners that really operate at the intersection of planning and public health. We are a province-wide not-for-profit organization, and we facilitate ongoing development of communities where it's easier for people to be healthy and well. And then within our programs here, we're going to focus on our PlanH program. So the next slide, please, Pat, which is what this webinar series is today. We do support two large programs with our organization, PlanH, as well as age-friendly communities. And this webinar is a part of our PlanH Healthy Public Policy series, where really PlanH is aimed to help support local government engagement and partnerships across the sector for creating healthier communities. And this program is in partnership with the BC Ministry of Health and the province's health promotion strategy. Next slide, please, Pat. Perfect. Okay. And with that, I'm going to stop talking and put myself on mute and hand it over to Erika Sagert, who is going to start us off today. Thank you so much.
Perfect. Thanks so much. I'll jump right in then. Good morning, everyone. It's so wonderful to be here with you. I'm really appreciative of the invitation to be here to share a little bit on BC's housing crisis. Just a note, I am absolutely just the warm-up act for Steven. I have 10 minutes and 23 slides, so you're going to see me perform a bit of a miracle as I whip through my presentation just to set a little bit of a scene of what we're seeing going on in BC and what we're talking about when we speak about the housing crisis here in the province, and also what we mean by nonprofit housing and really what we're hoping to see as BC's nonprofit housing association. So I'm going to start by talking a little bit about where we're at with the housing crisis, a quick note on how we got here, and then I'll talk about where I think we need to go. So next slide, please. So just starting by acknowledging that I'm calling in today from the unceded territories of the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples, and also noting that BCMPHA's work takes place across more than 200 First Nations across BC. Next slide. Very quickly, I have a few slides about who we are. So the important thing to know is we are not BC Housing, which we are often mistaken for, understandably. We are actually the umbrella industry association that represents nonprofit housing providers here in British Columbia. We formed back in 1993, and we have a little over 40 staff. Next slide, please. So our members are across the province. There's about 500 of them. And the thing to note is really how affordable housing gets delivered in the province of British Columbia is very largely through nonprofit housing providers. We're somewhat unique in the country, and that nonprofit housing providers really support and help government deliver on their mandate to support British Columbians to find affordable housing. And this is the general distribution of our membership across BC. Next slide, please. So a little bit about what we do very quickly. As I said, we're the umbrella association that represents nonprofit providers. My team is responsible really for the research and advocacy work that happens behind the scenes at BC Nonprofit. We're also responsible for the education and training programs. So BC Nonprofit Housing Association supports really the capacity of the sector here in BC, and we do work nationally as well. A few things that we do, so we have the Canada's largest affordable housing conference every fall, which is Housing Central, coming up in November. We also do a lot around asset management services. So we support nonprofit housing providers in really stewarding the buildings that are in our sector. And we have a lot of different opportunities for the professionals who work in nonprofit housing in the province to develop their skills and engage in peer learning opportunities throughout the year as well. Next slide, please. We are bigger than our members. The sector, we represent the entire sector here in BC, and we're a sector of around 1,200 nonprofit housing providers who operate more than 110,000 units of long-term affordable housing across the province. So this is really representing the full range of what we consider to be community housing. So everything from transitional housing, supportive housing, all the way to independent units, which look like an apartment building that wouldn't seem much different to a market, a private rental building that you see in your communities. Next slide, please. But what I'm actually here to talk about, so the housing crisis. These are probably some very familiar headlines that we see every day as we look through various news sources. The crisis has been alive and well in Canada and in BC very acutely for a long time. And only to note before I jump into some of the stats that I have to share this morning about really what the crisis looks like, when BC MPHA is talking about a housing crisis, we're really focused on rental housing. So renters on average in Canada make half of that of homeowners. And when we're talking about affordable housing, we're really talking about rental housing. So a lot of the stats that I'll be sharing this morning are very focused on rental housing. Next slide, please. So I'm going to start with a little bit of bad news, and then I have a little bit more bad news. But starting with the first set of bad news, this is likely not news to anybody who's attending this webinar this morning, but vacancy rates in the province of BC are very low and rents are very expensive. So we've seen some softening in recent years. We've had quite a bit of investment, which I'll touch on in a moment, in the province, which is we're starting to see some shifts in the market. But what's important to note is from our perspective and what we're hearing from providers, it's very likely that this softening is somewhat temporary. And for some experiences, like if you can see that bottom slide on the bottom left there, the bottom graph. So in some places like Kelowna, we might be seeing vacancy rates that aren't softening a little bit. In places like Penticton, we're actually seeing the rental market getting tighter. So going from 1.5% in 2023 to 1% in 2024. So actually getting tighter. And in general, we think of 3% as a healthy vacancy rate. So generally speaking, in the province of BC, we're not really seeing healthy vacancy rates, which means that for folks that are relying on rental housing for affordable and sustainable housing, the folks are struggling. They're continuing to feel like they're in a very competitive market. And that's, evidenced by these vacancy rates that we've continued to see these trends over the years. On the right there, I know that'll probably be a hard slide to read, but that's essentially just looking at the cost of housing. This is rentals.ca is a good resource of just generally tracking what rents look like across Canada. And as you can see, Vancouver and Burnaby up there, British Columbian cities continue to top the list in some of the most affordable rents in the country. Next slide, please. So a little bit more bad news, like I said, in addition to feeling like we have quite a very clear pinch in our rental market, we're also losing a lot of the affordable housing that we already have. So there's a term that we often refer to in the sector, which is naturally occurring affordable housing. And really what that means is it's units that are renting already in the market where they may have had a family or an individual living in them for a long time. And so because of that kind of long-term rental, it has meant that their rents have stayed relatively low to what things are renting at in the market today. And as folks are shifting around, and I'll speak a little bit about evictions in a moment here, but as folks shift around, we see that rents jump up as tenants move from unit to unit. And so if we're tracking that through the census, what you're seeing here on this slide is that in BC between 2016 and 2021, the last two census periods, we've seen a decline of almost 100,000 units in British Columbia that are renting below $1,000, which seems like a very low rent, but when we talk about the incomes and what folks can actually afford in this province, that's a very relevant statistic to be looking at. And one thing to note is it is very hard, and I'll touch on this in a minute, but it's very hard to build housing today that is affordable at those levels. So what we often say is the homes that we already have are the most affordable homes in the province. So it is really concerning when we see them being lost. Next slide, please. So this is just the same graph, but specifically zeroing in on Penticton. So the experience that we're seeing across BC is also mirrored in places like Penticton, where they're seeing a pretty significant loss of those units that are renting at more affordable, naturally affordable rates. Next slide, please. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some data here quickly from the Canadian Rental Housing Index. So this is a custom data set that BCMPHA manages. It's an interactive website with rental statistics for all of Canada at various levels, so from municipalities all the way up to the provinces. I encourage you to take a look at the website. There's a lot of really interesting information on there about the health of rental housing in various communities. And it uses, at this point, 2021 long-form census data. And that's just the reality of where we're at with the census, but it's a very good tracker long-term to see how the rental market is faring, and really looking at different household groups too, if you're interested in more details. Next slide. So looking at that Canadian rental housing data, BC really stands out in the country. So of the 660,000 renter households in British Columbia, almost 40% are spending more than 30% of their income on rent and utilities. And this is generally what folks use as a standard to understand affordability. So if you're spending more than 30% of your income on rent and utilities, generally understood that you're not spending at a sustainable level on your housing. You're likely struggling to save, and you might be making really difficult choices about how spending happens in your household. For example, extracurricular activities for your children or things like that. And we also know extra pieces like the cost of food continues to increase and create a real burden for families. So all of these come into play. We can also see that of those folks, there's 16% of them are spending more than 50% of their income on rent and utilities. And this is really what we take as a mark of being on the verge of homelessness. So you might be one unexpected bill away from not being able to pay your rent. And so really concerning numbers, both in terms of proportion when we look at that compared to Canada, but also really important in just the volume of households that are on this very unstable spending when it comes to their housing in the province. And it's also important to note that the data from the last census was collected during 2020. So it reflects a time when a lot of Canadians, particularly low and moderate income, were accessing the Canadian emergency benefit. So they're likely their income was skewed upward. So it actually is making our affordability picture look a little bit better than we might have expected. Next slide. And just this is the same again, but just zeroing in on Penticton here. So we can see that the numbers are slightly worse than provincial average, with more than 44% of renter households in Penticton spending over that 30% mark, and about the same there with the 16% spending more than 50%. Another thing to note on this one, which I think is interesting, is it's also important when we're talking about delivering new affordable housing to note that the median and average income in Penticton is lower than the rest of the province on average as well. Next slide, please. So very quickly on how did we get here? This is a long, complicated question, and I'm sure, as you can imagine, there's a lot of different theses out there, folks who have tried to answer this, and I'm only showing one snapshot of it. But one way to talk about it is the investment that we're seeing from the federal and provincial government and what's happened over time. So a very important piece to note, as I'm sure many folks may or may not be aware of on the call, but the federal government really pulled out of the housing game back in 1993, and this meant that we had lost a generational investment in affordable housing, which has really been what we've been feeling in terms of the repercussions here in British Columbia today. You can see that there's that sort of flatlining for 30 years, and then back in 2019, we see a national housing strategy, and suddenly we start to see a little bit more federal investment, but we're still really trying to catch up following this blip. Next slide, please. A little bit here, so a similar slide looking at provincial investment in affordable housing over the years. So this is really where the provincial government really feels are put in the position where they need to step up and fill this gap. We saw a kind of moderate level of investment for a long time in the province, and then an uptick after 2017 when the housing crisis really started to feel, that pinch started to feel really severe for a lot of British Columbians. And I remember back doing a lot of our election campaigning at the time, and it feeling like housing had really topped the list of issues for voters at that period of time in a way that it hadn't before. So next slide, please. And speaking of that, so back, if we want to talk about how do I know that there wasn't enough investment in affordable housing for a long period of time? Well, we did the math. So back in 2017, we released our first fully costed plan on how to fix BC's housing crisis. And at that time, we were looking for a total of 115,000 units, which were needed for low to moderate households in British Columbia, which would get folks out of that kind of core housing need level, out of homelessness, and into homes that are generally affordable and sustainable for them long term. So we were asking at the time, this felt like a huge ask, had really been an unprecedented level of attention that we were seeing on housing during the provincial election at the time. Next slide, please. And since then, we did see a lot change. It was really a focus for the NDP and the Green Party in the 2017 election, who then formed government, and we saw a lot of investment over that period of time. This is from the Stronger BC report, so this is a sort of self-reported numbers on how the NDP has been delivering on housing. It's important to note here, you're seeing around 32,000 new units of housing being delivered through BC Housing in particular, who flows funds through nonprofit housing providers largely. And we're seeing these new homes being delivered, and thousands of families across the province are moving into new affordable housing, which is definitely truly something to celebrate. But anecdotally, I think all of us know from this period of time, from 2017 to now, it doesn't really feel like we've solved the housing crisis. So if you go to the next slide. There's a few factors that indicate this. One of them is that, we're still seeing those really high rates of renter households and core housing need. And also at a very minimum, through the point in time counts that we have here in British Columbia, we know that at a minimum, there are 11,000 individuals that are experiencing homelessness and surviving on our streets. So clearly we haven't been able to build our way out of the housing crisis at this stage. And it's also important to note that we're expected to gain quite a few renter households. So regardless of the pinches that we're feeling in the market now, there will be we're projected to have a pretty sizable increase in more rental households into the future. And just a statistic on the bottom there that 1 of 5 BC renters has experienced an eviction in the past 5 years. And what's important to know about people experiencing evictions beyond the kind of traumatizing nature of that experience for a lot of folks, it typically means that folks are landing in units that are costing them a lot more than what they were paying before. So while we stand out in the country around some of this eviction data that's come out in recent years from some of the major academic institutions in Canada, really continuing to impact the shape of the crisis here in BC. Next slide. So given that from 2017, last year in 2024, we did some more math. We released our second affordable housing plan for British Columbia, again, looking at how many units would it take to solve this housing crisis in the province, and importantly, what would it cost, and what were we really looking for from government and from community partners in order to really get ourselves into a better situation when it came to housing. And after doing that math and seeing all that, after seeing all that investment that we've had since 2017, we're still seeing a need for 125,000 new homes in the next 10 years, specifically for households making less than $50,000 per year. That's really important because that tends to be a level of income that is not provided by market builders. So those are not folks, if you're building a new rental building now at market rents, it's not going to be affordable to people under $50,000. And that's really why that was the making less than $50,000 a year. So that's really why we focused on that for this approach. For this research project. And I'll show in a moment that really what this points to is that it's really critical for every level of government to understand their role in addressing the housing crisis and getting really creative and ensuring that they're being really enabling of the sort of environment that's needed to solve the crisis. And if you want any more information about any of the data that I shared and also just about these reports, I know they're going to be shared with the folks that are attending this webinar today too. Next slide, please. So where do municipalities fit in? Well, we really need municipalities to be proactive enablers and work in true partnership with our sector. It is incredibly difficult to deliver new homes to British Columbians that are affordable to local rents. And it really makes a difference when we see municipalities go above and beyond and get proactive in working in partnership with our sector to try and make a dent in the housing crisis. And just a few notes there. So one of the big pieces is that details really matter. There's, a provincially mandated, there's a provincially mandated requirement for local governments to produce housing needs reports as of 2019. But there's many different approaches that local governments can take to participating in those housing needs reports, and the details truly matter. We need folks where we're seeing the biggest successes in the province is where people are really taking an active approach to working with the data that comes out of their housing needs report and digging into more details than what has just been mandated by the province. We also need municipalities to contribute all the land they can. So to really take regular stock of the lands that they have available that can be offered to nonprofit housing providers to work in partnership to build new units is really seen as a base level starting point for creating affordability in buildings in the sector, and has been for a while now. We also need to see people fast tracking nonprofit housing because it's simply not the same as market housing. With any development, time costs money, but when it comes to nonprofit housing, that time and the money that it costs equals a reduced ability to make rents affordable at the end of the day. So when there's a mission and mandate to deliver break-even operating a break-even building at the end of the day, it's really important that the homes get to market as quickly as possible so that they can have those kind of lower rents that really make them affordable to people in local communities. We also need prevention. So it's really important that we talk about renters being protected. The more people that end up on the streets, or the more folks that get pushed from unit to unit, really ends up driving up the issues that we're seeing with the housing crisis in the province. And lastly, just a note on Indigenous housing needs. We continue to see through the kind of ongoing colonial legacy here in British Columbia that Indigenous folks are overrepresented in a lot of the housing needs statistics that we have, and also in experiences of a homelessness. So where we see the most successes with local government is when folks really go above and beyond in working in partnership with First Nations and urban Indigenous organizations to understand how that need is unique, and to address it at a really deep level. Next slide, please. I just have a couple more slides very quickly. So the last slides just really illustrate what I'm talking about here. This is a concept that tends to be a little bit difficult to describe, but all it's meant to get across is that we need all levels of government to work in partnership with nonprofits in order to make rents affordable. This is a relatively recent example from Delta, and you can just see how many pieces needed to fall into place to make affordable rents in a new building. So very important to see that all folks are kind of using every tool at their disposal to create the enabling environment that then means that rents can be affordable in a new building. And so this is just, you can see the levels that are stacked on the contribution from the city, the money that's come from the federal and provincial government, and sort of how all of that has come together to actually drive down rents so that at the end of the day, a building that opens up in your neighborhood is actually affordable for folks. And I think it's interesting to take note here, having attended the Union of BC Municipalities conference last week. It's really clear that the province of BC is going to be feeling a very real economic pinch, and there'll be a reluctance to do some of this kind of senior level spending on housing, which is going to be felt really severely in our sector because it really does make a big difference. And I recognize that particularly with local governments, folks feel really the brunt of community members, expressing concerns over housing, and they really have the least amount of ability to make some of these big dents and making buildings more affordable, but there's still that really important role to play. And so that's when we really talk about partnership and getting creative and trying to be as enabling as possible. And at a very minimum, sets folks up to be a really appealing partner for senior levels of government to work with to deliver some of those more senior dollars into community to get affordable buildings built. Next slide. This should be my last one. And so just ending on a quick note here that stewardship and ownership really matter. So when I talk about fast tracking nonprofit housing, it's important to really recognize why nonprofit housing is different to market housing. So even a project delivered today by our sector that's renting at those kind of higher market level rents will be renting at a significantly cheaper rate long into the future, simply because it's run by an organization whose mission is to keep those rents as affordable as they can in perpetuity. So this is just a clip from Yute Lee's video that this is talking about Athletes Village, two different examples of a co-op next to a condo, and seeing years after they're built, just side by side, two very similar buildings, one led by a cooperative and the other is a market building, and the difference in the two, in the average rents in the buildings being very significant. So 1900 versus 45 of just the different of stewardship over time. So just really driving home that point that if that who we are having deliver our housing, and that kind of stewardship of those buildings in our communities really does make a big difference over time. Next slide. I think that's it for me. I'll pass it over to Steven. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Erika. That was great. And welcome, Steven.
All right, awesome. Yeah, hello everybody, and thanks for joining today's webinar. My name is Steven Collyer, and I'm the Housing and Policy Initiatives Manager at the City of Penticton. And big thanks to Erika for helping set the stage for the first part of the webinar here today. I'm joining today from the traditional territory of the Syilx Okanagan people, and grateful for the Syilx stewardship of these lands since time immemorial. I'm lucky and excited to share the story of Penticton's social housing and infrastructure plan today. I want to acknowledge as I present today that this work was a truly collaborative effort, and I'm thankful for my colleagues and community partners who worked so hard to bring this project from an idea to a reality. Next slide, please. I'll also start by thanking BC Healthy Communities. The BCHC team supported with a grant for this project in 2022. Penticton was awarded a Healthy Public Policy grant. to support the internal housing policy review underway at that time. What we didn't know was that this project would evolve over the years to respond to significant housing policy shifts happening at both the local and provincial level. So kudos to the BCHC team for allowing this project to pivot over a few years, reflecting these major shifts. Next slide. With the Healthy Public Policy Grant awarded in 2022, we had a newly elected city council at that time, and they set housing as one of their key priority areas and also formed a housing task force locally. The task force was a group of 13 community members with experience in housing to review the city's official community plan and make recommendations to council on policy changes to support the development of not only more homes, but more attainable homes. The task force was supported with data from a housing needs assessment completed that year, setting the data basis for what housing needs exist in the city. One of the 18 recommendations ultimately presented by the task force to council was for the creation of a social housing plan in the near term to provide strategic direction to determine and achieve a range of non-market housing goals. The impetus behind that recommendation was a recognition that non-market housing directly supports affordability goals, and there was a need to see the share of non-market housing in the city grow. Council ultimately endorsed all 18 task force recommendations in December 2023. Next slide, please. So again, setting the stage, around the same time that those task force recommendations were presented, as many of us will know, the province adopted significant housing initiatives that led to monumental shifts in how local governments plan for housing, ultimately ending single family and duplex zoning in core serviced areas, setting a minimum density framework around transit exchanges and process improvements to prohibit some public hearings and align land use plans with housing needs. Lucky for us in Penticton, the provincial directives were largely aligned with the local housing task force recommendations. The city incorporated the local recommendations and provincial directions into an updated OCP and zoning bylaw in 2024. Around that same time, council pre-zoned 3 vacant city-owned sites that council had endorsed for social housing. We completed an internal lands review and identified the 3 sites that they were vacant, not committed for other uses, and that they were large enough to support social housing projects. Bringing 3 sites at a time helped distribute the focus across the city as the sites were located in different neighborhoods. We recognize that building housing on city land helps affordability by eliminating the land costs from the development and help demonstrate the action taken to support housing affordability directly. But we also recognize that 3 sites on their own would not go very far to support the residents' housing needs. So we knew that we needed to work in partnership with others to maximize those opportunities. Next slide. Our next move from there was to carry out the task force recommendation for a social housing plan. And we started to think about how to structure that project. We had the conditions coming together to really co-create this plan to be tactical, action-focused, and uncover the opportunity sites and partnerships needed to progress on the housing needs. We recognize the city's role for this project should be more as a partner and enabler of housing rather than directing the work and acting only as a regulator. In Penticton, 100 More Homes is a well-established collective of local housing providers and service agencies supporting knowledge sharing and collaboration among the sector rather than competition, with a view that we go further together than alone. A key question guiding the upcoming project was how to design a framework where the city acts as a partner and supports sector collaboration, supporting a lens of abundance instead of scarcity. Often cities release a site for RFP with little information about what other opportunities might exist, so prospective operators end up competing against each other. We want to see how can we back up and observe the opportunities and map out what type of housing and which partnerships might be well aligned to make progress on a range of needs. Next slide. With these intentions in mind, we fleshed out more of what the social housing and infrastructure plan would entail. The plan would be co-developed in a consensus building effort with the sector and be detailed enough to actually lay out what's next instead of only highlighting the needs without tangible projects to advance. The diagram on this slide summarizes the key components of the plan well, that the plan matches nonprofit and service partnerships with aligned vision, mission, and values, with opportunity sites across the city for new projects. The plan would include housing needs and social infrastructure needs, recognizing that healthy communities are those with housing options for all residents and a range of services to support high quality of life. Next slide. After those framework elements were set out in spring 2024, we started carrying out work towards co-creating the social housing and infrastructure plan. That first included a survey sent to community housing partners in July to gather initial feedback on what a social housing plan should entail and seeing what the sector thought of the opportunity and scope. Data was important to inform the project and upcoming collaborative sessions. And while we had a recent housing needs report on hand, we found that the standard method didn't do enough of a deep dive into social housing and non-market needs. So we ended up commissioning a social housing needs report in August to understand those needs in a clearer, more detailed way. The first round of partner engagement sessions were held in October over 2 half days. A key component of those sessions was bringing in a third-party facilitator, which allowed the city to show up as a partner and not a director of this work. Our staff worked closely with the facilitator to set up the sessions with the goals of organizing partners by shared vision, mission, and values, introducing the needs data and having a validation discussion on that, as well as uncovering opportunity sites and starting to slot in which partners and what next steps might be on the sites that were raised by the group. Next slide. In the photo on the next slide here, you'll see that we had information posted all over the walls of the room during these sessions, and the start of the opportunities matrix, as we call it, is being developed on the right side wall with big yellow and orange sticky notes. Each row that you see is an opportunity site, and the columns actually outline different aspects of those sites, whether it be the organizations interested, the potential funding sources, uses envisioned, key target population groups, and specific next steps, which are key to future progress check-ins on action on the plan. Next slide. So back to the timeline. In February, we regrouped the partners for round 2 after compiling all the content generated in the October sessions. Again, we hosted partners over 2 half-day sessions with the same third-party facilitator. The goals of round 2 were to reflect back what we heard in round 1, flesh out the social infrastructure needs, and see if there was anything we missed in the October sessions. Out of these sessions came the content for the plan. Next slide. With a continued focus on co-creating the plan with the sector, city staff compiled and polished the content from the February sessions and hosted a virtual check-in with the group on draft documents in May 2025. And that was really to confirm the direction of the project with participants. This was an important step to ensure community partners were involved and engaged throughout the process while recognizing the city's ability to compile the information into a concise, action-oriented 17-page plan. Final design and last adjustments were made in time to present the SHIP, as we call it, to Council for endorsement in June. Over the next few slides, I'll speak to some of the sections of the social housing and infrastructure plan. So feel free to follow along. I believe the link is in the chat if you'd like to check out the document itself as we go over the key sections. Next slide. One of the sections I'll overview today is called Understanding Equity in Housing. To help position the SHIP, this section speaks to intersectionality and how to account for the needs of various family groups in the community. The housing story and needs of various groups are different, and we know that some racial and ethnic minorities face discrimination, and people with disabilities often have specific physical or service needs in their homes. This plan avoids prioritizing family groups based on population size. Instead, it focuses on groups with greater projected increase in core housing need over the next 20 years. So for example, in Penticton, seniors make up a substantial portion of the population, and a focus on serving the greatest number may miss the needs of smaller population groups that are expected to grow in core housing need at a faster rate. The Social Housing Needs Report projects a greater increase in core housing need for families with disabilities, racialized households, and single mother households and Indigenous households. Of course, with an intersectional lens, one household may fall into multiple categories, and those households may face even greater barriers to finding suitable housing to promote a high quality of life. Next slide. The next section in the plan builds on the equity lens and addresses a common issue in housing reports, the lack of human connection to the data. Often housing needs and projections are distilled into numbers and housing units, but of course people don't live in housing units, they live in homes. And people have unique life circumstances that affect their housing story. In this section and throughout the plan, small vignettes like these are included that contain anonymized stories of real people in Penticton that community partners have worked with or supported. These were brought forward in the partner sessions, and the vignettes remind us of the real people and community behind the numbers and helps put those numbers of homes and projected needs into context. These are homes for real people, and we decided to insert the vignettes into the data-heavy sections of the report and the plan to showcase examples of the needs in the community. Next slide. Continuing to set the stage here before transitioning into the data sections of the plan is a section on indigenizing our perspective. Guided by the principle of two-eyed seeing and incorporating both traditional and contemporary knowledge in planning for housing and social infrastructure informs the collective direction of this plan. Home is more than a building. It's a place where stories are shared, knowledge is passed down, and people form a connection to place and community. Through collaboration and multiple discussions with the local Penticton Indian Band and the regional Métis organization, the SHIP incorporates Indigenous perspectives on housing and challenges and opportunities for urban Indigenous housing. Through relationship building with the local band and discussions on the project, we were encouraged to align the work with UNDRIP, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission calls to action, and the calls for justice, recognizing that safe, accessible, and culturally grounded housing promotes wellness and community safety. Indigenizing our perspective also showed up in the design of the project framework, with an emphasis on being community-based, organizing based on values, sharing in circle, and enabling all participants the opportunity to share their knowledge. These process elements help develop this community-led and equity-focused plan. So with the next slide, moving on to the data, these sections summarize the needs both for non-market homes and for social infrastructure. The non-market home needs are derived from the Social Housing Needs Report commissioned to support a data basis of this plan. The needs report looked at a homelessness prevention lens and focused on providing more affordable rental and social housing units to prevent residents falling into homelessness in the first place. Overall, the projected need over 25 years is for the current stock of non-market homes in Penticton to more than double by 2046. The social infrastructure needs were generated from the partner engagement sessions and highlight some ongoing work in these areas. The plan defines social infrastructure as those places other than home and work that serve people's well-being, whether they include gathering space, social space, and places that serve physical, spiritual, and daily needs. Incorporating them into the social housing and infrastructure plan helps elevate them in a new capacity and includes next steps to track progress. The social infrastructure needs include a food hub to support vulnerable residents, more multicultural spaces, social enterprises, co-work spaces, childcare, a seniors hub, integrated services center for those at risk of homelessness, and nonprofit spaces in general. As a theme that emerged from the sessions is that many local organizations are running out of adequate space to effectively serve a growing community. Next slide. The Social Housing and Infrastructure Plan ultimately sets out recommended actions for the city and community partners. For the city, those recommended actions are to explore and implement tenant protection measures under the provincial legislative framework for those measures, completing regular reviews of city-owned land to seek new and emerging development opportunities, and to seek funding opportunities to expand city land holdings in general for housing. Another recommended action was to introduce housing incentive policies, and these include things like permissive tax exemptions, energy efficiency supports, development fee reductions, development cost charge reductions, looking at utility rates, density bonus policies, parking requirement reductions, pre-zoning. We know that a lot of those policies do support nonprofit housing and affordable housing development in general. So really finding made in Penticton ways to bring those policies to light to support those housing needs. On the next slide, the recommendations continue to expand the city's pre-development grant fund to support new nonprofit housing projects at an early stage, continue to conduct intergovernmental relations advocacy on new projects requiring partnerships, as we know, with the provincial and federal governments with funding support from those governments, recognizing the disproportionate needs of Indigenous people for housing and targeting a proportional share of new units for Indigenous people, and continuing to work collaboratively with the local Penticton Indian Band on projects relating to housing in both communities, as we know that both communities have housing needs that are distinct and also need keen attention. In addition, on the slide here, you'll see community partners had their own recommended actions as those that were participating in the process to continue exploring emerging partnerships and opportunity sites in a collective manner and really supporting that information and knowledge sharing, and to seek collaborative opportunities to work together on future projects, recognizing that multiple needs can be addressed if different organizations can work together. Next slide. The success of any plan really lies in how it's carried out. So the monitoring steps are important. Collectively, community partners agreed that each year we would gather and track progress on the opportunity sites and recommended actions. This is why it was important to get granular and set specific next steps for each site to launch from needs to action. These annual meetings will also allow for new and evolving opportunities to be captured and raised by the collective group for support. In fact, we're having our first of these annual check-ins 2 weeks from now. Every 5 years, the underlying data will be updated with the census timeline. And at the same time, the city will distribute a new survey to nonprofit sector partners to ensure both the quantitative data and qualitative data are up to date, and the SHIP is based on the best available information. Every now and then, opportunity sites list will be updated as projects complete, and we'll celebrate joint successes together. Next slide, please. Attached to the 17-page plan are the opportunities matrix, which is the detailed list of 15 opportunity sites fleshed out by community partners. 10 of those sites are listed in detail, with 5 more sites to explore further in the partner regroup sessions. The 3 city-owned sites that started this process are included in the matrix as near-term opportunities, along with some other sites where the landowner was present in the process. Some other sites are listed as longer-term opportunities as they involve sites that are owned by other groups, for example, the federal government. Maps of the fully fleshed out opportunity sites are included too, and the full version of the social housing needs report included as well. A copy of this survey that was sent to partners at the start of the shipbuilding process is the final attachment, providing a reference for future survey distribution at the 5-year update. Next slide. Looking a bit more closely at that opportunities matrix, you can see that it's more detailed and less high level than many similar plans in other communities. The level of details outlined for each opportunity site help make each opportunity more tangible and action oriented. Affordable housing plans and strategies are often high level, outlining the needs. We wanted to know the needs, but get granular, answering the questions around who can be involved, in what roles, and on which sites. The details in the opportunities matrix helps us address many different needs at the same time and provide enough information for us to be able to track progress based on the specific next steps that are listed. Next slide. As I wrap up the presentation over the next couple slides here, I wanted to share that for this project, we really took a different approach than what the community typically has taken in the past. The city shifted in role from a regulator to a partner and an enabler. Engagement with the sector multiple times led to a co-developed plan inclusive of many different perspectives. We used third-party facilitation, which directly helped position the city as a partner and not a director of the work. Bringing local organizations together in the room had a ton of benefits. The value of people seeing what others are working on and allowing for connections to align on vision, mission, and values was critical. The plan's goal is for alignment and not confinement. The outcomes represent opportunities moving forward, but are not intended to be restrictive if projects take a different direction or if new partnerships emerge. That's part of the reason for the annual check-ins is to help advance these opportunities together. Next slide. And to wrap up the presentation today, I'll share some of the lessons that we learned through the process. I think this slide just needs to advance in a moment. All right, thank you. For us, we found Indigenous engagement requires intention and relationship building. We learned that multiple conversations and going to the band and having conversations in the lead up to expecting participation in a larger group session was absolutely necessary to help further deepen the relationship and to address some initial questions or comments that may come up in that process. We learned that organizations may hesitate to share everything, but that building trust just generally takes time. So we don't underestimate the value of coffee chats and sort of one-on-one conversations with partners. Again, similarly to address potential questions or concerns that maybe folks don't feel comfortable raising in a large group setting. And again, trying to build that momentum and interest in joining the project and joining the collective. We found that city initiative can lead others to follow For example, by putting 3 city-owned sites into the process, we were showing we're committed to this work and what other opportunities are out there, which really supported building momentum around the plan itself. In terms of broader implications, involving the community housing sector directly was really powerful to help empower and scale up the sector. We hear a lot of folks in this space saying that the community housing sector really needs to scale up. As Erika mentioned, the needs are still great, even over these years of refreshed investment. But helping to coordinate and collaborate together in that space was really helpful to get that scale up energy locally in Penticton here. And for local government, really important to participate as a partner. Sometimes local governments have a tendency to want to make all the decisions and feel like they have the solutions, but really leaning on that sectoral expertise and the groups that are working in these spaces every day really helped us develop a much more comprehensive and action-focused plan than if we had tried to lead this work on our own. And lastly, that healthy communities have a wide range of housing, social spaces, and services. And that's really why we saw that marrying of social housing and social infrastructure in this plan, and really noting both needs and different ways to progress on those needs, because it really does help support people with quality of life and well-being, and making sure that their various needs are addressed and that they have a great place to call home. So the last slide is my last one. Really appreciate your attention. I know we have a few minutes left for Q&A, but happy to follow up with any folks later on. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Stephen, for the excellent overview of the great work that's been happening in the City of Penticton. Great. And so that's fine, Pat, if you want to go to the next slide, that's perfect. So just coming back to, perfect. Recognizing again that this is a part of BC Healthy Communities Healthy Public Policy series of webinars. And really the goal for these, as we were able to hopefully highlight today, is to bring some of the communities that we work with forward to share their stories, as well as other experts in the areas for topics that are relevant to our communities across BC, and really support the sharing of information, knowledge translation exchange, and partnerships across the province. And really, again, this is something that we love as a part of BC Healthy Communities, to be able to share some of these experiences that the communities we've worked with in the past have been able to undertake, and explore that with other communities, and how those lessons and opportunities might be able to be used in other spaces. So next slide, please, Pat. So I had 2 questions in the Q&A, and recognizing we've only got a couple of minutes left here, but if there are any other follow-up questions afterwards that anybody would like to reach out, we're happy to help facilitate that and everything as well too. But and just a reminder that we will be sending out an information sheet along with the survey link for the webinar, so that we can collect a bit of feedback from folks who are able to participate here. Stephanie has put the link in the chat just now. If you can take a few minutes to finish to do the survey after the webinar or in the next day or so, we would really appreciate it. So there will be some follow-up content coming from us. But the first question, and there was a bit of chat throughout this session, which was great. It was nice to see people commenting and sharing their own experiences and information as well. But this was for Erika, and we're just wondering, could you speak to, on one of your slides, you had a statement about protecting renters through renter protection policies. Would you be able to give a few examples of the type of renter protection policies that you might be referring to?
Yeah, I think I saw someone answer this for me, so thanks for that. One of them that comes to mind is really those kind of tenant relocation policies. So looking at if there is a redevelopment or a rezoning and folks might be pushed out of their units, just ensuring that there's a plan in place to ensure that those tenants are supported through that transition, which was in the chat. And I think one of the other ones I would add is I've seen municipalities partner with BC Rent Bank. So just kind of creating some of those avenues for emergency access to funds to cover your rents, just again to prevent people from falling into homelessness.
Perfect. Thanks, Erika. And then the second question I captured in the chat, and I think either both Erika and Steven could probably speak to this, but have you studied the effect on affordable rental decline due to satisfaction of existing apartment buildings into condos? Oh, sorry, stratification of existing apartment buildings into condos. Do you recommend municipalities restrict the stratification of existing rental buildings?
Yeah, I'm not sure if this was for me or for Steven. I think a lot of municipalities do have strata conversion policies in place, and I know many of them are based on various thresholds of kind of when it's appropriate or not. In general, one of the hardest things that happened in housing in the 70s was allowing stratas to exist in the first place. Suddenly, for the first time, there was competition for multi-unit buildings to be for owners who, again, are a population that you're potentially selling to that have half the income of renters. So generally, that was a very tense time, but for sure for stratification, conversion policies are really important. I'm not sure,
Yeah,
Penticton,
just
if you have your own.
Yeah, I can add to that. So ours is a bit based on our local context. We don't see a ton of large building strata conversions, but we do have a policy that speaks to vacancy rate threshold, where for larger building stratifications, we want to see some connection to the vacancy rate of the day, and also to provide different layers of information like available rent buildings elsewhere. We need to see some sort of level of sign off and engagement from the tenant so that they are aware of this change coming through. We haven't seen it for a lot of older buildings, I would say, for that bigger scale structure, just knowing that some of the code requirements to convert to strata are quite onerous. So a bit of our context, we might not see the same pressure on housing as other places in BC for strata conversion. But yeah, definitely wanting to see some of those elements in place. And we're also in the early days of setting up a tenant protection bylaw ourselves under the new authority that the province granted last year. So making our first steps into that space, again, modeling based on what other communities have been doing for some time.
Perfect. Thank you. I have one more question that I'm going to just take the extra minute or so, because I think this is, I would love to hear the response, as well as I'm sure other folks on the line here. But this one's for Steven. What were the initial issues or pushback that you received from Indigenous groups when you initially proposed partnerships? Was your approach to relationship building similar for other equity deserving groups?
Yeah, great question. What we found from the outset was we started engaging people in a pretty rushed, I'd say, and standard way, where it's sort of just an email or a meeting invite to set that up. But we didn't provide a lot of the maybe background information and opportunities to have those, what we sort of call coffee chats or initial discussions before bringing people into a group discussion. So that was definitely learning for us. For example, with the local Penticton Indian Band, unfortunately, we didn't see participation from that group in our October sessions. And I think part of it was based on not setting that groundwork and relationship building around this specific project before setting that larger kind of community partner type session. So definitely recognizing that, we put a lot more focus in before the February sessions of having multiple meetings with those groups. And we did similar work with some other equity deserving groups as well. We have a local immigrant and community services group, and we know that they had some hesitations or some concerns about equity around the process. So for us, having those initial conversations with just those groups to help explain what our approach is, and really fleshing out and understanding what those concerns or hesitations from the groups are, really helped bring these groups along for the collective project, and really help share that there is a process and a way that they can share their voice and their perspectives, and that we're looking to take those into account and organize the project framework to really address some of those equity concerns that had come up from both those groups as well as the local Indigenous groups.
Great. Thank you very much. And I think just our final slide, please, Pat. Excellent. Perfect. And I just want to thank, I see our numbers starting to decline here now, and we've gone a couple minutes over, but this was a fantastic conversation. I just want to thank Erika and Steven again for joining us today, for sharing their experience to support equitable access to housing. And again, just sharing your work and your experiences with other folks across the province and across Canada. So we appreciate everybody joining us this morning on October 1st. Here's our contact information. If you have any follow-up, please don't hesitate to reach out, and we will be sending some follow-up messages as previously mentioned. So thanks again, everybody. Take care, and we'll connect with you soon.